Hello, thank you for your interest in nature journaling for a wild life. I'm Roseanne Hanson. Today I'm going to show you some tips on how to get started with watercolor in your nature journal using a minimalist approach. I'm going to show you how to use a water brush and a regular brush with this simple setup. I'm going to jump right in, so let's get started. All right, the first thing we're going to do is learn how to fill up the water brush. I have noticed that the instructions most of them come with don't really tell you some of the easiest ways to fill it up. So first, we'll unscrew it. This is the Pentel water brush. You separate the top from the reservoir, and then get a little open container of water. And the easiest way to fill it is to squeeze the reservoir, put it into the water, let go, squeeze the reservoir, put it into the water, let go, and each time it's bringing up a little bit of water. One more time, squeeze, dip, suck that up there, and we've got a pretty full reservoir now. Screw that back on so it doesn't leak from there. And now I'm going to show you using the water brush to paint some of the colors onto our color chart. If you have Nature Journaling for a Wild Life, my book, on page 63 is the information on mixing colors using the triad that I recommend, which are three basic colors, your cyan, magenta, and yellow. From these three colors, I can mix just about any color I need for nature journaling. And then I add burnt sienna and Indanthrone blue, which is a warm blue. And these together create beautiful blacks and grays. So let's get started with the water brush. You give it a little bit of a squeeze and release some water into the tip. Now don't be afraid to use your fingers here. Just don't lick your fingers afterwards because paints are pretty toxic. I'm going to wet the yellow there and see how much I've got. Yep, that looks pretty good. And don't want to get too much water. That's one of the challenges with water brushes. They do release water if you even squeeze it a little bit. So I want to make sure I don't have too much water. I'm getting a little bit more pigment there. And I'm going to paint in my yellow. That looks good. Don't want it too light. You want your colors to be nice and rich. So too much water will create weak looking paint on your paper. So you can see I'm drawing out the brush a little bit there. Now let's put our cyan in. Again, I'm going to get this nice and wet here. Not soaking, but enough so that I've got pigment on the brush. And let's see how that looks. That looks nice. So to clean it out, what I'm going to do is squeeze, get the color nice and wet in the brush. And you can see as I wipe it off, that's clean. Now I'm going to do the magenta. Even just pushing down like that, I'm not even squeezing the brush. I'm getting water coming out there. That's a little wet. So I'm wiping off the water there, and I'm going to try to get more pigment, less water. That looks good. See how nice and rich that is? All right, I'm going to squeeze, dab, squeeze, dab. It's pretty good. Now you can see pink on the brush there, but that's just stained. That's not going to come off on my paper. So to mix colors, let's say we want to get our orange here, which is magenta plus yellow. Then taking my colors in the palette here, I'm going to go ahead and dab up some magenta and mix over here and see what kind of orange I get. Getting it less wet there, a little more yellow. Because this is pretty watery, I want it to be nice, good consistency. A little more magenta. Let's see how that looks. It's a pretty nice orange. See how it looks on the paper. Not bad. I'm going to clean that off. Now, I've got plenty of paint here in the palette, so I can clean it off by swiping like that, getting it kind of swirled around. I usually have an extra rag here that, this is the microfiber, that I'll just quickly wipe that out. Set that there. And now let's mix a purple, which is cyan and magenta. So again, getting some cyan here, getting that a little bit wetter. There we go. And then I'm going to dip right in there. It's okay if you get it a little dirty. You can easily clean it out. So look at that purple. Wow. Beautiful. Really like that purple. Oh, that's nice. Coloring outside the lines here because I love that color so much. I wanted more of it. So here I'm going to squeeze, dab, and let's do a green, which is the yellow and the cyan. Now that yellow has a little bit of the magenta in it, so I'm going to clean that off a little. Get there, put that on the palette, cleaning it off just a little, and then let's see what the cyan does. A little bit too much blue. That's very blue-green. You see how that improved the green. Add too much water, dabbing it off there. And I'm going to add just a tiny bit more blue for a slightly richer green. That's nice. That's a really, really nice spring green there. You can see how nice that looks. So those are the basics of mixing our colors. These are the primary, magenta, cyan, and yellow, into the secondaries, which is purple, green, and orange. And how to do that with the water brush. So I'm going to clean off the palette now and then show you mixing black, grays, and brown using a regular brush and what my techniques are for that. Using my little spray bottle here, which is a great way to wet the palette without using up my water brush water. Getting that clean. Now when I'm using my standard paintbrush, which is an Isabay Squirrel Mop, this is a travel brush, so you can see it folds down into its own handle to protect it. When I'm using that one and my paints, if I haven't used them yet, I'll want to wet them a little. I'm going to wet the blue and the burnt sienna with the spritzer, and that refreshes them because I don't have a water reservoir in my regular brush. Now, I've made a little water container here out of a simple plastic cup. You can get anywhere. From takeout places, wash one. I glued a washer to the bottom so that it snaps onto the magnet there, creating a nice little water reservoir that I can use walking around, and it'll snap closed to store. Now, I got my brush wet, And I'm going to basically do the same thing I did with the water brush, only I'm having to get my water out of the reservoir. So here we're going to be making black using the burnt sienna and Indanthrone blue. Need a little bit more blue, still very sienna. Just keep mixing, mixing, mixing. Black, you need to mix quite a bit to get a nice black. That's beautiful. And let's see how that looks here. Look at that lovely dark. I like this kind of black or dark much better than pre-purchased blacks like lamp blacks, which are just flat black. They don't have this beautiful richness that you get from mixing a black. To get grays, you're going to either water that down a little bit. See how that is just a beautiful gray. If I want it to be a little bit more blue-gray, then I'm going to add a little more of this Indanthrone. There's a more steely blue-gray, which is a beautiful, beautiful color as well. So you can practice all the different proportions to get the kind of darks you want. Notice how I'm swishing, dipping. I'll even use my fingers to squeegee that out and get my brush back to a dryer. So I'm going to wipe the palette out again. And now to get the brown, this wonderful brown, is easy. It takes a little practice, but you can get a beautiful rich brown by mixing your primaries, cyan, magenta, and yellow. So let's throw some on the palette and see what we get. So here's my yellow, and I'm going to dab my cyan, the green, and watch what happens when we go add our magenta. Look at that. Oh my gosh, that's beautiful brown. Gorgeous. Beautiful earth tone. And you can vary that with adding more magenta for a redder brown, or a little bit more blue will give it a richer brown with a little bit more of the gray or dark tones. Let's take a look at that. I'm going to swipe that there. See, with a little bit more blue, that has a darker, leans more toward the black. So there you have simple color mixing, how to do so with a regular brush and a water brush using the triad method. Triad +2 is what I call it for minimalist painting. I hope you'll have fun practicing and getting some color into your nature journals. Thank you for listening.